And good evening. How's everybody doing? Thank you for logging in this evening for the exam 3 review with Dr. Chris Roddenberry. How's everybody doing? I see we have several people on the chat tonight or on the broadcast tonight. If you're here on the broadcast and you're logged into YouTube, go ahead and type into the chat bar and let me know that you're here. I'm going to bet that Angelina is probably here. You're always here, Angelina. I would be shocked if you weren't. It's good to see everybody. I am sorry about class this week. This is a professional development week for me here at Wake Tech. And so I had meetings scheduled all during the morning this week, so I just went with recorded broadcast. Hopefully that will be okay for everybody and you were able to get something from the broadcast that I gave you. The broadcasts were recorded this summer during my lectures, and so they represent a pretty current thinking of my knowledge on the field. So hopefully they will be helpful for the exam. All right, let's see. Goodness me. Okay, we do have a couple of viewers here. Okay, Jordan Hughes, I've got online. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to see somebody just to make me feel comfortable and let me know that somebody was in fact on the broadcast. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and switch to screen sharing and we're going to go over the exam if that's cool with everybody. All right, so I just clicked over to my screen. You should be able to see the exam 3 review right here. Okay, this is going to be, let's see, 25 plus 25, 50 questions covering chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12. That's 4 chapters. We have about 12 and a half questions per chapter. Remember, this is a 60-minute exam. For those of you who have extended time based on paperwork with the IEP system here at Wake Tech, if you have extra time, you are of course allowed to take it. But we have 4 exams. We have 4 chapters with 50 questions, 60 minutes. Okay, I see that we have Aubrey Littrell here as well as Jordan Hughes. Fantastic. And I'm going to bet that Angelina is lurking out there somewhere. So let's go over these questions real quick, shall we? Okay, so chapter 9, which is motivation and emotion. There are 14 questions. 3 of these questions will be true and false, and 11 of these questions are going to be multiple choice. All right, so here we go. One question is going to ask you to discriminate the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Remember, intrinsic motivation is something that motivates you that's inside your body, and extrinsic is something that motivates you that comes from outside of your body. For example, interest might motivate you to learn a musical interest, might motivate you to learn a musical instrument. On the other hand, the fact that you want to earn $100,000 a year may be the reason that you are going to nursing school. So if you enjoy something and then you are probably intrinsically motivated. If you're doing something for a reward or payment, it's probably extrinsically motivated. All right, now, with regard to motivational theories, I talked about one theory of motivation was this drive-based theory. And I talked specifically within the context of drive-based theories, I talked about temperature maintenance. So what is the brain structure, the hypothalamus, that controls our temperature? And what are some motivated behaviors, some behaviors that occur based upon the activation of this hypothalamus? I talked about behavioral disorders and physiological changes that occur. So your hypothalamus causes 2 sets of behaviors. It causes behaviors and physiological changes to occur in you with regard to maintaining a constant temperature. I want you to know that brain structure and those motivated behaviors. Now, on PowerPoint 9A, slide 3, I gave you a chart of the general theories of motivation. There's needs-based theories. There's these drive-based theories. There are extrinsic-based theories. I'm going to ask you two general questions that allow you to tell me if you know these different general theories. Look at this particular PowerPoint, slide 3, and look at the different theories of motivation and be sure that you can differentiate among 3 of those. Now, among the needs-based theorists, I talked about several psychodynamic theorists, and I suggested that they all said that human beings were driven by individual needs. Freud said the individual need was the desire for sexual gratification. Alfred Adler said the drive that motivated most people was a need for superiority and for dominance. And I told you that the primary motivation of human behaviors, according to Karen Horney, was the desire for interpersonal connection. So I want you to know that each of these 3 psychodynamic theorists thought that human beings were driven by a single motivation. Now, I then described to you Maslow's theories of motivation. I don't know if any of you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anybody on the broadcast right now, do you remember hearing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yes or no if you're on the broadcast. Now, if you remember, that's that triangle-shaped picture that we had on our slides, and I suggested to you that Maslow's intuition, his innovation, was that he thought that Horney, Adler, Freud, and all these other different psychodynamics theorists were right, but they were right at different times. And he argued that human beings were motivated by different things depending upon what they are missing. So I've got 2 questions where I want you to understand that Maslow says that human beings have different needs, and I want you to know specifically what self-actualization is. Go and look in PowerPoint 9a and it will tell you that. Okay, now, PowerPoint 9b. I started off PowerPoint 9b by talking about 3 old-time theories of motivation: the James Lange theory, the Cannon-Bard theory, and Schachter's 2-factor theory of emotions. And their theories were discussing the aspects of the cognitive aspects and the physiological changes that are associated with emotions. I have 2 questions where I ask you to tell me which of these 3 theories of motions I am talking about. So go back to PowerPoint 9b and look carefully at slide 1 and see these 3 general models of emotions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a situation. Jason is in the woods. He sees a scary bear. Now this bear causes him to start sweating and his heart starts beating faster. Jerry then interprets this physiological change. He comes to an idea, a cognitive idea, that he is afraid. Which theory of emotions does this represent? And you would probably say, well, that sounds like the James Lange theory. His physiological changes caused his mind to change, which caused his final emotion. So go look at those general models of emotions. If anybody wants to talk to me further about them, I would be more than happy to talk to you in a personal meeting. But I talked about them fairly thoroughly in the lecture. All right, now, it was PowerPoint 9b, probably the 2nd or 3rd slide. I talked about the functions of emotions. What do emotions do for us? They provide directional markers for us, telling us what we do and don't like. They allow us to evaluate our own behavior, what we're proud of or not proud of. And they also allow us to engage in more smooth interpersonal interactions with other people. So I want you to know those 3 functions of emotions. Now, we had one slide where I talked about developing emotional control in children. One of the most important things you can do for your children, rather than teaching them how to read or do math, is to teach them how to control their emotions, how not to be an angry person. And in your 9b PowerPoint, I talked about some best practices for helping you teach your children how to have emotional control. And I talked about the two brain areas associated with emotional control, your amygdala and your frontal lobe. Okay? Oh, and excuse me, the three classic models. And then I want you to know about um, the circumplex model of emotions. Emotions is having two characteristics, valence and activity. And you'll see that on PowerPoint slide 5, I think it is. Okay? Now, chapter 10, 11 questions, 5 true and false questions, 1 matching, and 5 multiple choice questions. Okay, now, if you'll remember back from this chapter 10 lecture, I talked about the difference between genetic and mature biological expression of sex. Your genetic sex is the chromosomes that you have. And there really are only 2 genetic sexes. There's genetic males and genetic females. So some people are right when they say that about sexuality. However, when you talk about the phenotype, that is the mature biological expression of sex that we have as adults, because of the process of sexual unfolding that occurs in our body, it's an epigenetic process that requires lots of things to happen properly in the correct sequence. Not all people express this dichotomy of sexuality. There are people who fall somewhere in the middle between male and female. Either they have male and female primary sexual parts or the characteristics, or they have secondary male and female characteristics. So I did, if you go back and look at lecture 10, I wanted you to understand the complexity of the question of human sexuality. Yes, there are only 2 genetic sexes. However, when it comes to mature expression of sex, people can sometimes fall on a variation between prototypically male and prototypically female. In that lecture, I talked briefly about some hormones associated with sex, males for testosterone, females for estrogen. I want you to know that. I want you to know the XX chromosome is female, the XY chromosome is male. That's the 23rd pair of chromosomes, right? And then in your book, in the lecture, I talked about chromosomal abnormalities and their description. So sometimes people will have 2 Y chromosomes. They'll have 47 chromosomes and they'll have XYY in the 23rd pair. Sometimes people will have XXY in the 23rd pair. They'll have 2 X chromosomes and 1 Y. Some people will only have 45 chromosomes and they'll only have 1 X chromosome in their 45th pair. I talked about these chromosomal abnormalities and what kind of sexual characteristics they led to. I've got a matching question where I want you to match these chromosomal abnormalities to their descriptions. All right? Now, in the lecture, we talked about primary and secondary sex characteristics. Primary sex characteristics are any characteristics that are directly related to sexual procreation. Your penis or your vagina, your ovaries or your testes, your sperm or your egg. These are primary sex characteristics. Secondary sex characteristics are those characteristics that appear during puberty. The females growing the breasts, the males getting the broad shoulders and the hair on their chin, everybody getting pubic hair and underarm hair. These are all secondary sex characteristics. And these are the parts of people that sometimes don't turn out to fall into these normative characteristics of male or female, right? I want you to know what gender identity is. It's different from your genetic sex and it's different from your biological sex. It turns out your hormones also cause you to have thoughts which are more characteristically male or female. People who are transgender have a set of thoughts and belief patterns that are not consistent with their biological sex. We talked about gender identity. Now, I then talked about gender roles socialization. How do you learn to be a boy or a female? And we talked a little bit about the process by which that happens. And then I did have one question I want you to know. Does nature or nurture determine your sexuality? So can having homosexual parents make you a homosexual person? Does environment affect your sexuality, or is it mostly genetic? I have one slide in chapter 10 when I talk specifically about that. I want you to go look at that slide. Okay. Chapter 11, motivation and emotion. 13 questions. 3 of those are true or false. 10 of them are multiple choice. Okay. Now, I do remember we've been talking about subfields the whole semester. What subfield of psychology is interested in stress and coping? If you look in PowerPoint slide 11A, you're going to see that it is health psychology. I'm going to ask you about that on the exam. Know that health psychologists are the people that help us deal with stress and overeating and smoking and all these other habits that are bad for our health, okay? Now, we talked about the biological response of stress. We talked about cortisol. We talked about adrenaline. We talked about the HPA axis. We talked about the hypothalamus and the adrenal glands. I want you to be familiar with these biological processes in the fight or flight response, the autonomic nervous response, okay? I do want you to know, we talked about what causes stress. We said sometimes it's your genes, it's your biology. Sometimes it's your psyche, your psychology. Maybe you're an uptight person. And sometimes it's the cultural environment you grow up in. So we talked about the biopsychosocial model of stress. It's suggesting that stress comes from these 3 different areas, right? I wanted you to talk about the experience of stress, the difference between daily hassles and major life changes. I want you to know that the experience of stress is psychological and depends upon how you decide to interpret the things that happen to you. Okay, now we had a slide where I talked about Hans Selye's GAS model, his general adaptation syndrome, and he's the guy that explained how our immunity is affected negatively by stress. He argued that when we have a stressful event, our immunity spikes and gets real strong to protect us because our body thinks we're going to get hurt. Now, he argues that if this stress lasts a long time, our body's immunity responses stay high for too long, and it causes our system to wear out. And then our immunity actually drops down below normal, and we become more susceptible to illness. So go back and look at that chart that I have on the GAS model of stress and physical illness. Now, I talked to you about daily hassles and major life changes. Remember, having a parent die, getting married, having a new baby, changing jobs. These are my major life changes. They don't happen often, but they do cause stress. They can be positive and they can be negative. On the other hand, we talk about things like daily hassles, like the traffic, that annoying person at work, the fact that you have to cook dinner, that you have to do groceries, you have to wash clothes every day. Those are negative daily hassles. On the test, I'm going to give you a couple examples, hassles and major life changes, and I'm going to ask you to tell me, am I talking about a daily hassle or am I talking about a major life change? Okay, now, I forget what slide it was, but I talk about different personality styles that protect you from stress. I talked about the type A personality, bad for stress. I talked about being an optimist as being good for stress. And I talked about ego hardiness, psychological hardiness. And I want you to know what the qualities of these 3 personality traits are that seem to protect people from stress. So if you're an optimistic person, stress is not going to harm you as much as if you're a pessimist. If you're one of those type A persons that blows up and has a really bad temper, stress is not going to treat you well compared to people who have a calmer type B personality. Okay, so I want you to know about the difference between personality and stress. We then talked a little bit about anorexia, and I want you to know about the gender patterns that we see in the expression of anorexic symptoms. I want you to know, those people who smoke in high school, a third of them are going to continue smoking into adulthood. I want you to know which country in the world smokes the most. Okay, now I want you to know that exercise, not only does it affect your physiological well-being, but it serves as a protective factor against dementia. Okay, I'm going to ask you that. And then I want you folks all to know, do what you will, what you want, but it turns out that having that piece of paper for some reason does make people live happier and longer lives. It turns out that being in a good marriage, not just cohabitating, but having that piece of paper tends to be associated with a longer life and more well-being. Okay. Finally, chapter 12, 12 questions. Social psychology. One general question, what exactly is an attribution? I talked about attributions. It's the way that people explain the things that happen to them. We then talked about the way in which people tend to make biased attributions. We talked about the actor-observer effect. We talked about the fundamental attribution error. We talked about the better than average effect and positive illusions. Did you know that almost everybody thinks they are better than average in intelligence and looks? Statistically speaking, 50% of the people are below average in intelligence and 50% of the people are below average in driving and looks. And yet none of us seem to understand that. This is because we all have these self-protecting biases in attributions. I talked a little bit about social identity theory, this idea that human beings have sort of a built-in process which causes them to be biased against the outgroup, people that don't look similar to them. And we talked about how this leads to automatic and controlled processes in prejudice. It turns out that we all have the automatic tendency to be biased and to make prejudicial judgments about other people. However, there are some people who learn to control these biased processes that are normal. All people normally are biased against the outgroup, people that don't look like them, be it color, be it gender, be it whatever. We all have that. It's built into the system based on social identity theory. And it turns out that people who are not biased have learned to control this. And what happens is when you put these controlled people in a situation where they're under pressure, they will go back to being prejudiced in their thinking. We then talked about three group effects, three ways in which groups affect our behavior. I talked about group polarization. I talked about social facilitation. I talked about social loafing, and I talked about bystander apathy. So in group polarization, it turns out if you talk with a group of people who are similar in attitude to you, you are going to become more extreme in your attitude. So for example, Republicans who do nothing but talk to other Republicans on social media become even more extreme Republicans. Democrats who do nothing but talk to other Democrats on social media become even more extreme Democrats. This is because of group polarization. Social facilitation, sometimes when we're being compared individually, participating with another person actually makes us perform better. So this is called social facilitation. On the other hand, when we're put into a group and we're being graded as a group, human beings tend to engage in social loafing. They don't work as hard. And then finally, we found that sometimes When people see an emergency, they're actually less likely to help if they see other people there. It's because people seem to be apathetic to being the first person to act in a group session. Okay, now I spent 2 slides talking about attitudes in general. I have one general question. What exactly is an attitude? There's a definitional slide which says an attitude is this, this, and this. I want you to know that. And then I have one question where I talked about the fact that people can influence us. They can influence us 2 ways. Through informational influence, we don't know what the right answer is, and so we read other people as legitimate sources of information. And then sometimes we conform to other people's behavior because we just want to fit in, even if we know the behavior is wrong. We just want people to like us. So I have one question where I give you an example, and I want you to tell me if it's informational or normative influence. Okay, that's all I have to say for exam number 3. Does anybody have any questions? I notice we still have a few people here, maybe Jordan, Aubrey, and I'm not sure who the 3rd person is, but I do want to thank you for coming. Do you have any questions before I log off? I'm going to go ahead and wait just a second. You know what? If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a text or an email, and I would be more than happy to text you back. If you want to jump into a Microsoft Teams meeting and have a 5-minute consultation, I am more than happy to consult with you if you need that too. The exam will be available on Friday morning at 9 a.m. and it is due Sunday evening by 11:59 p.m. Don't forget, as usual, you have your discussion board and your homework assignment due on Thursday and Friday. All right, cool. Y'all take care. Thanks for letting me know that, Jordan. Y'all have a great evening, and I hope to see you next week in class. Take care.